I decided to do a retake of that video I uploaded, mainly because I felt it was too long, it was too rambly. Though this is going to be called a rambling video, I went off on a few other tangents and I didn't really care to do those other tangents. I'm just going to focus this entirely on 28 Hammer horror films in 2 specific sets. These 2, to be specific. We have an 8-film set called Hammer Horror Collection. And then we have the 20-film set called the Ultimate Collection. Both of these can be found on Amazon or other types of internet digital stores. Blu-ray, they're remastered, they're cleaned up, the sound is crisp, the picture is clear, it's really well done. On the back, we have listed Universal for this one. On the back of this one here, we have Columbia. It should be Columbia. Where does it say it? Maybe it's on the inner sleeve here. We're going to pull this out. This came in a case that was defective, so I took all the discs out. They were all loose. Okay, I don't want to drag that out. It'll take too much time to go off on another tangent. But it looked like this. As you can see when you open this up, the case here, this one's actually decent. It was made properly. But the little rungs that you place the Blu-ray discs on for this case were so thin that half of the discs were loose in the case upon arrival. This was brand new, by the way. One of the discs was scratched and one of the movies lost about 5 minutes of footage because of it. I'm very disappointed in the cases for this package, but this one's really well. This one's fine. So let's put this back in here and take a look at the back of this. It should be on here or on the back. Yes, here on the back. Let's see. By 1959, Hammer had been in business since the 1930s, specializing in... Let me just read it by flipping this around. We're going to start at the beginning here. The versatile films by Hammer Columbia. See, as it's different here. Hammer, Columbia, Universal. So maybe there's a difference there between the films made in the here and these films that I'm not sure. But Hammer Columbia. March 5th, 1959, Variety carried feature story. Hammer Films, blah, blah, blah. Hammer, here we go. Carried a feature story that horror titans Hammer Films would make 5 movies a year exclusively for Columbia Pictures, the very first time a British film company entered into a full partnership with a major American studio. By 1959, Hammer had been in business since the 1930s, specializing in second features for UK cinemas. Second features. You remember the drive-ins where you have double features, and the second one's usually the B-roll, the B-film. That's the second feature. They broadcasted their scope in the early 50s, churning out crime dramas with American stars like George Brent before exploding into a low-budget powerhouse in 1957 with the success of The Curse of Frankenstein. The Curse of Frankenstein. All of the Frankenstein films are absolutely amazing. One of them is on here called The Evil of Frankenstein, and one of them is on here called The Revenge of Frankenstein. Those are the only 2 Frankenstein movies I have, but I'm definitely looking to grab the rest. Peter Cushing's Frankenstein is, in my opinion, the superior Frankenstein to almost all of the Frankensteins I've seen in cinema. I've not seen too many. I've seen about 4 or 5, but he is the best of those that I've seen. And I've seen the original Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein in the old Universal Monster Movie Collection. I've got that somewhere. In that collection, there's a different person playing the character Frankenstein. Although, what's the guy's name? Boris fucking Karloff. I don't know how many times I'm gonna forget his name. I know what he looks like. His face is unforgettable. He is the best creature in every version of Frankenstein. However, Peter Cushing is the best Frankenstein out of every Frankenstein that I've seen. And I've seen the Boris Karloff Frankenstein movies, and they are very, very good. Bride of Frankenstein being one of the best sequels ever made. But Peter Cushing just delivers a different Frankenstein that is very charming, as he demands your attention on the screen, and you have to watch him, right? So let's get back over here. I went off on a little tangent there, but we're not going to cut this. With the success of The Curse of Frankenstein, the first gothic horror film to be made in color, starring Peter Cushing as the creator and Christopher Lee as the creation. Director Terence Fisher's gory treatment of the classic story received hostile reviews in Britain and the incredible worldwide box office. Stars and director were reteamed in 1958 for Horror of Dracula. The Dracula series, I sadly only have one, and it's on a different set. It's a random 7-film monster movie set with only one of the Hammer films in there, and it's the worst one. The Brides of Dracula or something like that. Count Dracula and his Vampire Bride, I think that's it. It's in terrible condition, and there's nothing to say about that other than to say that Peter Cushing plays Van Helsing in all of the Dracula films, and Christopher Lee plays Dracula in all the Dracula films. So that's very well done. If you want to see good performances, really good charismatic performances, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee in most of the Hammer films, they will deliver that for you to even greater success. And the Hammer brand was solidified, glossy, period horror decorated with fangs, monsters, flashes of blood, and gorgeous leading ladies. Although the beautifully made Revenge of Frankenstein in this collection, and the Gorgon also in this collection, are classic Hammer horror, the Columbia deal would showcase the company's creativity beyond the Gothic to new genres and dramatic experimentation. The bloody horror of war was shown in Yesterday's Enemy, a stunning drama starring Stanley Baker, while the robbery film Cash on Demand boils with suspense and features a superb Peter Cushing performance, to which I agree with. Scream of Fear became a model for all of Hammer's terrifying thrillers to follow. I agree with that as well. Scream of Fear ended up being the movie that Christopher Lee would go on record to say was his absolute favorite Hammer performance that he had ever done in his entire career with Hammer. Scream of Fear was his favorite, not just for his performance, he just had a supporting role, but it was his favorite film. And I would agree that this movie, Scream of Fear, which is in this set here, this one right here, is the pinnacle of Hammer psychological thriller. It is such a fantastic romp. And the realistic Never Take Candy from a Stranger showed the company could approach a disturbing taboo subject with honesty and sensitivity. Let's talk about that one for a little bit, because this one is a film that I would have to say caution you greatly. Like, when you look at movies like The Gorgon or The Revenge of Frankenstein, or any of these horror classics like The Evil Frankenstein, or The Curse of the Werewolf, Phantom of the Opera, Brides of Dracula, any of those types of films, when you look at those, they're basic monster movies. They're very entertaining. They're not too terrifying. They're not too, they're not going to be, But Never Take Candy from a Stranger is a very cautious, a film that I have to caution you over. If you are sensitive to certain subjects involving certain things to which I'm not going to go into detail on in this video, you can always look this up on the Wikipedia, which I recommend you do. If you ever think to watch this, you should at least do a little bit of homework on it, because there is some subject matter in there that may make you very uncomfortable. So just some viewer discretion advised. It is a very well done film that treats it with the care it deserves, and I would say that it is aged really well. The colorful adventures of the Pirates of Blood River and Sword of Sherwood's Forest showed Hammer's skill with another classic genre. Adventure movies. Yes, there are 2 adventure movies in this collection here. Like the little back said, The Sword of Sherwood Forest and The Pirates of Blood River. The Pirates of Blood River stars Christopher Lee as a pirate captain, and In this one here, there's Night Creatures, which stars Peter Cushing as a former pirate captain. They're very well done swordsman swashbuckling adventures. They're not super high budget, but they don't have to be. They're very entertaining. And the terrifying warning of a nuclear world gone mad, These Are the Damned, remains one of their triumphs. Let's talk about that one for a moment. These Are the Damned. Where did it go? Right here, this is the third film on the set. These Are the Damned features something interesting. Now, when this film was made, I believe, let's see if the year is on here, 1960. I wonder what was going on in 1960. I believe it was the Cold War. Korea might have been finished up by then, but the Cold War was going on for quite a bit, right? Everybody was afraid of the nuclear apocalypse. And this film was one of the many films released over these decades that talk about a potential about that type of future, that uncertain future. This deals with a group of children who are basically immune to radiation. Their skin is cold as ice to the touch of anybody who is not immune to radiation, because these children actually radiate. They are radiated. Like, what's the word I'm looking for? They are radioactive, that's it. They are radioactive children. They're very radioactive. They are basically fatal to anybody who is normal, who goes near them. But essentially, these children are immune to radiation themselves. They do not mutate. They do not turn into monstrous creatures. For all intents and purposes, they look completely normal. They act completely normal. They are just immune to radiation. There was a terrible accident involving their parents, and when their parents had children, this was the result. Immune to radiation, and these kids were taken to a facility to be monitored and raised away from the rest of the world, while scientists are studying them to try to figure out how they could replicate this immunity to radiation in the event of a very uncertain and terrifying future involving nuclear warfare. Something that might be relevant, but we're not going to talk about that. But it's a very interesting take. I would say that it's definitely worth your attention. Let's finish this last few sentences up. The Hammer Columbia films proved to moviegoers that the masters of horror were actually just masters of cinema. Now, they talked about some of these, but I'm going to talk about the rest of them on this set. But first, just give me a second to close this up. I'm going to try to cut to that. Alright, I closed that up. I didn't want to put that on camera. So I'm going to go through all these that the little booklet, special booklet, didn't talk about. The Revenge of Frankenstein we talked about. The Curse of the Mummy we did not talk about. So let's talk about that. The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb is Hammer's version of the Mummy Tale. Now, I would argue that the Universal's version of the Mummy Tale is superior. Boris Karloff's performance is excellent, but that version of the Mummy Tale takes your attention to the mummy. The mummy is the main character. The mummy is the main focus, and you basically care about the mummy character, and all the other supporting characters are just would-be victims, and you're just wondering, is he going to kill them? Are they not going to die? You don't really care. They're not there fleshed out. In this one, it's the opposite. All of the scientists and archaeologists who find the mummy, the story is all about them instead. You're focusing on them instead of the mummy. The mummy is merely the backdrop to the film. It's not necessarily entirely horror like The Revenge of Frankenstein and the Gorgon, but it's horror in a different way. It's really decently done. It's kind of slow-paced, but I would say it's decent enough. So it's worth your attention. Down here to the Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll. This is on disc 2 alongside These Are the Damned. The Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll is a decent enough drama, but it's kind of with the backdrop of terror to it. It's drama with the backdrop of terror. Christopher Lee plays a friend of Dr. Jekyll's, but he's not necessarily a good friend. He's a gambler, he steals Dr. Jekyll's money, and he's sleeping with Dr. Jekyll's wife. So that's not necessarily a good thing, is it? No, definitely not. So he's going to get his comeuppance when Mr. Hyde comes out, because Dr. Jekyll is way too meek to stand up for himself. So when he creates this little concoction that allows his alter ego of Mr. Hyde to come out, the confidence goes full scale, but he also brings out a primal rage that was buried deep inside of him that ends up going on a rampage of murder. So it's tentative. It's really decent. It's really decent. The Old Dark House was the one that was on the disc that was scratched. I lost about 5 minutes of footage on this one. But this one is Hammer's attempt at making a horror comedy. And I would argue that they did a really good job, and I'd argue that they succeeded. This one is very fun to watch. I didn't miss too much in that 5 minutes that got cut. The Gorgon is excellent. It is a classic gothic horror film, and it stars both Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. Whenever you have a movie with both of those people in it, it's going to be excellent. So The Gorgon is excellent. Peter Cushing comes back for Cash on Demand, which is a heist film about a bank on Christmas that is going to be robbed, and you are wondering what's happening during this entire period. You don't know if they're going to get away. You don't know who's actually in on the heist. You're guessing the entire time. It's really well written. Snorkel and the Maniac are psychological thrillers. I would argue the Snorkel is the superior of the two. I believe these two are on the same disc, but the Snorkel is the worth watch. This one's just the B movie. But the Snorkel is about a killer who you open the film with the guy killing somebody, and the main character knows that he did it, but nobody believes her. So throughout the entirety of the film, you are basically seeing a cat and mouse between the killer and the protagonist, as they are living in plain sight, because the killer is actually the protagonist's caretaker, and she's trying to get him arrested for the murder of her mother, and nobody believes her. So you have to go through the whole film to see how that goes out. It's really well done. The Maniac, I kind of checked out, but if you want to watch it, watch it. Die Die My Darling is a good kidnapping movie about the ex-fiancé of a dead person, and the dead person's mother, who kidnaps the ex-fiancé and traps her in a room upstairs, and she's pretty mentally disturbed from grief. She's got a shrine to her son in the basement. It's really decent. I don't want to give too much away, but you definitely gotta see it. Stop Me Before I Kill is also very good. It is about a recently married couple that were very happy until they got to a car crash. After the car crash, the husband starts having fantasies of killing his wife. He doesn't want to do that. He really loves his wife, but he doesn't know why he has fantasies of killing her. And then you go to a series of psychology sessions with a psychologist, psychologist, whatever. The counselor is talking the husband through the ex and trying to get him to remember the accident and how it happened, and why he had repressed all of the memories, and why he actually wants to kill his wife. He doesn't actually want to kill his wife. He just has dreams of doing it, and they're bothering him. I don't want to give too much away other than that, but definitely worth a watch. These two we talked about. Stranglers of Bombay and The Terror of the Tongs are kind of like British dramas set in foreign countries. This one I believe was set in India, and this one I believe is set in Hong Kong. They deal with a secret cult type of place, and you have a British officer trying to uncover that cult. It's got a lot of intrigue in there. It's decent enough, but they're not the best in this selection. I talked about these two. Let's go quickly about these two at the bottom here. Yesterday's Enemy, these three at the bottom, I mean. The Camp of Blood Island and Yesterday's Enemy are war films. They're British war films. One of them is set in the jungles, about a camp, about a contingent behind enemy lines, and their struggles with that. And one of them is kind of like Hearts War. If you remember Hearts of War, starring Bruce Willis as General McNamara, you remember that this was a brigade that was prisoners of war to the, I believe it was the I believe it was in Hearts of War it was the Germans. In Yesterday's Enemy it was the Japanese. But it's basically the same movie. So if you know what Hearts of War is, that's Yesterday's Enemy. But I'd still say that you should watch Yesterday's Enemy. It's decent enough. Now we're finally going to get to the most interesting film in this entire collection. Not the best, but the most interesting. Creatures the World Forgot is technically a silent movie. Nobody speaks a word. They do make sounds, they make grunts, they yell, but this takes place in long ago history with the first humans. And you're dealing with about a couple tribes of humans as they just go about their lives and try to survive. There's a long segment where they're trying to get food. There's a long segment with a witch doctor, and then the clan leader dies, and then the clan leader has two sons, and the two sons are fighting over who gets to lead this clan, and one of them is an evolved type of human who builds traps and tools, and all the other people of his clan, they don't understand his ways, and they're shunning him. It's just really well done. There's not a single word of dialogue, and yet over the course of 96 minutes, you are captured to watch everything, to see the whole thing and how it turns out. I'm not going to spoil the ending, I'm not going to spoil any more of it, but you have to see that movie to believe it. This collection is definitely worth the price. As for this one, I would agree. It's also worth the price for the Frankenstein movie alone. The Brides of Dracula, sadly, Christopher Lee does not reprise his role of Dracula because there's no Dracula in it. But Peter Cushing reprises his role as Van Helsing, which is very decent, well done. Curse of the Werewolf is the only werewolf movie that Hammer ever did. During their entire foray into movies, they never did another werewolf movie after this one. Not because this movie's bad, they just never did one again. It stars Oliver Reed as the Wolfman, and I would argue that he is the better Wolfman than the one in the original. So that's that. Night Creatures is a swashbuckler. It's really good. Peter Cushing's in it. Phantom of the Opera, this one is a remake of the remake. There was a remake from the Universal Monster Movie collection that I've got. I forget who's in it, but it's not a musical. But it's the first one to have spoken dialogue. The first Phantom of the Opera that I know of was a silent film. I've got that one too, but I haven't seen it yet. This one's the third one in the lineup of Phantom of the Opera, and it's still very well done. It's a bit darker than the previous one that the Universal Monster Movie selection had. I would say that that one, the 50s version, is better than this one, but this one's still worth the watch. It's still worth the watch. Paranoiac is a very good psychological thriller, as is Nightmare. These two depict the mind in a very good but overly dramatic ways. They're very fun all the same. They're black and white, as I would argue that most psychological thrillers of this time period would, should, and probably are in, because in black and white, the psychological thriller really does come out and show itself. Like Psycho, Hitchcock's Psycho, that feels really good in black and white. If you put that movie in color, it would probably not do as well. That's what I would argue with Paranoiac and Nightmare. They need to be in black and white to work, and they worked. Kiss of the Vampire, also a really good vampire story. Fun. These are fun, good classics. And they showcase the best potential that Hammer's got. Would you look at that? I shaved off 7 minutes! Good job. It's imaginative.